Hello, people of Earth, and hello, Murray Griffin. How are you going?
Very good. Thanks, Francisco. Another big week this week.
Indeed. Very interesting things happening. I'm looking forward to some interesting Queensland things to discuss. But before we jump in, what was your pick of the week, Murray?
So, my pick of the week was actually in New South Wales, and it's a proposed New South Wales law that aims to cut the amount of plastic waste generated in the state. And the proposed law, or bill as it's called, has just passed the lower house of Parliament and it's now before the upper house. Now, this bill is a response to what the New South Wales government calls a waste crisis in the state. And the reason the government says there's a waste crisis is because on current trends, Sydney is on track to run out of landfill space by 2030. And
Which
plastic
is only a
waste,
stone's throw away, it
I
feels
know
these days.
it's not very far away at all. And plastic waste is a very serious problem in the state. A few years ago, only about 15% of the plastic waste that was generated in New South Wales was actually recycled. And that meant nearly 800,000 tonnes of plastic waste ended up in landfill. And that figure doesn't include all the plastic waste that ends up as litter, where it becomes a huge problem for wildlife. So one of the things that this plastic reduction and container recycling bill does is to make it illegal to refuse to give a customer a takeaway coffee in a reusable cup. Now, you might think, well, that's not going to do much, and to some extent that's right. But a couple of years ago, more than 800 million single-use plastic cups, including plastic-lined coffee cups, were used across the state. So that's a lot of takeaway coffee, Francisca.
That is an awful lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you say 800 million?
Yes, 800 million single-use plastic cups. I mean, imagine what it would be like in Melbourne.
I was just going to say, that's New South Wales, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, and so most of those 800 million cups were then landfilled if they didn't end up being littered. So the proposed law, as well as saying that cafes can't refuse to give people coffee in a reusable cup, also lays the groundwork for introducing a scheme to make it mandatory that single-use plastic products must be designed to be recyclable, which would be a very important step forward. Anyway, so not surprisingly, the New South Wales government found there was really strong support for the sorts of measures that are in this bill, with 90% of individuals and 80% of organisations supporting them. And that's out of almost 7,500 survey responses.
That sounds like a wonderful step forward.
It definitely
It
is.
makes
Yeah.
me a little nervous when I forget my keep cup, and I just really need a coffee. But there's a cafe near mine that has these old ugly mugs that you can take and bring back and donate more, that mugs that no one wants. So it doesn't matter if you forget your keep cup, you can take one of the ugly mugs.
That's a good idea. Yes. And your pick of the week?
Well, Murray, about a week ago, the Grattan Institute, one of Australia's well-known think tanks in the climate space, published a report called Out of Gas, Managing the Decline of Gas in Australia. The premise here is that we've got a declining demand for gas in some sectors. For example, houses have decreased their overall consumption of natural gas by 16% since 2020. And industry by 10%. But we've still got significant projections of gas into the future. That also needs to be abated if we want to have a net zero future. So it needs to be reduced if we want to have a net zero future. And this report systematically goes through the different opportunities, the different options we have for decarbonising gas and all the implications we need to think of as we reduce gas consumption across industry. It looks at the displacement of fossil gas with renewable gases like biomethane, which we talked about last week, or hydrogen, which we also know is a low emission or carbon neutral gas in many instances, depending on how it's produced.
Yeah.
So a fascinating report that makes some really sensible, in my opinion, recommendations, including integrating our planning for a transition away from gas in with our planning for electricity networks so that we can do gas reduction and electrification at the same time, which seems very sensible. So definitely recommend giving that a read.
Yeah, it is a great report, and not surprising given the Grattan Institute. They do some terrific work. And there's also a podcast that the Grattan Institute has done on this particular report that's worth a listen as well. So,
Our quiz question for the week.
yes, we do have a quiz question. And Francisca,
It,
what is the quiz question?
it is, how many large data centres are currently applying to connect to Australia's main electricity grid? And the choices are 3, 11, or 48. Stay tuned to hear the answer to that one.
Yes, and it's an important question because they suck up a lot of electricity. So we need to know how many of them are on the horizon, even in the short term.
And I think it's a number, and our understanding of this has changed significantly in the previous, year or so, including forward projections on it. So
Yep.
stay tuned to hear.
So, on to the rest of the news, and we need to talk about hissing cockroaches, Francisca.
Do we need to talk about it much?
We really do, because Australia's Climate, Environment and Water Department has recently seized more than 100,000 live cockroaches from a business in Bathurst, New South Wales. And these cockroaches had been illegally brought in from overseas, and they included Madagascar hissing cockroaches. So
Oh,
now you might think, why would somebody import 100,000 cockroaches? Did that cross your mind? Uh,
it did indeed, actually. It was one of the first thoughts I had, Murray.
yes. So, well, the reason is that they can sell that the business could sell them for $2 per cockroach to owners of snakes and lizards who use them as live feed. Now, the thing is that bringing in these sorts of species is incredibly dangerous because we don't know how they might spread disease, and we don't know how much harm that might in turn cause to native wildlife and to agriculture. So the department, as well as seizing the cockroaches, said that reptile owners who have been using imported roaches as feed should use legal alternatives like crickets and wood roaches instead. So if you want to see or listen to hissing cockroaches, you should head to Madagascar. Don't try to bring them into Australia. And Francisca,
What a story.
yeah, what a story. And do you want to hear some audio of hissing cockroaches?
You don't have audio, Murray, do you? You're joking.
No, actually, I don't have real audio, but I
Oh,
imagine they go something like this.
oh my gosh, no. I won't be looking that up later. No, this story, I actually heard it on the mainstream, not through our newsletter. Before I heard
Yes.
about it through our newsletter, and it did astound me. I think it was actually a breeder that's
Okay.
been breeding them as well. Yeah, and I didn't particularly want to dive more into the story than that, but
No, I think we've.
thank you, Murray, for your imitation as well. You're very,
Thank you,
very
thank
good.
you. Yeah.
Oh, okay, moving on. Okay, the National Press Club in Canberra. How do I move on from that story, Murray? The National Press Club in Canberra hosts a wide range of speakers who deliver major speeches on matters of great national or international significance. For example, after the budget, it hosted Treasurer Jim Chalmers and then Shadow Minister Tim Wilson. And last week, it hosted international energy expert Michael Liebreich. His speech had a great title. It was called Whatever the Question, Clean Energy is the Answer. And here are a few audio extracts from Michael's speech.
The explosive growth of renewables is happening everywhere. So last year, over 80% of the electricity generation in Africa, the Middle East, South and Southeast Asia was wind and solar. And it's clearly not because these countries are particularly woke or because they're trying to please their World Bank or even their BRIC Bank overlords. It's because renewables represent the cheapest way for those countries to secure additional power for their growing economies. As long as you have access to finance, you want to build the asset, you don't want to burn the fuel. And ask your mining companies, because they've been building wind and solar for years. Now, Australia plays a leading role in this story. And not just because the father of modern photovoltaic technology is an Australian. Professor Martin Green of UNSW, but also because at 75% renewable penetration, South Australia is one of the absolute leaders among the world's grids. In fact, behind only Denmark and ahead of California. You're also, as I'm sure everyone here knows, world leaders in the penetration of residential solar roofs, serving comfortably over 30% of all your homes. And crucially, it's not just about the number of the penetration. You are also leaders in being able to install those roofs cheaply, less than half the cost of an equivalent system in the United States. And now it looks like you're going to do the same thing with home batteries. Scale, standardization, and competition really work. Australia also has a big place in the history of grid-connected batteries, which started with the big battery. If you remember, it was mocked by your PM, Scott Morrison, who said it was about as useful as a roadside big banana or big prawn. Well, the Hornsdale Power Reserve delivered $150 million worth of benefits to the grid in its first 2 years. Fast forward to this year, and grid-connected batteries are now pushing out gas peakers, which means they're reducing the number of hours that gas, expensive gas, sets the price of power. And the Australian Energy Regulator has published its so-called default market offer, which will begin in July and save up to 11% from the power prices of Australian consumers and businesses. And let's hope that is just the beginning.
Yeah, so those were some fantastic comments. He's a terrific energy commentator, isn't he?
Fantastic. Yes. And I've heard he's also got a podcast, which I'll be giving a listen as well.
Okay, so Francisca, do you happen to have a multi-billion-dollar project that you're trying to develop in Queensland? Maybe a new
Oh,
mine or some new infrastructure or a new
what
minerals
a
processing facility?
interesting and specific and leading question, Murray. Look, I've got a few ideas, but you're all at concept stage. Why?
Right.
What do you? Are we going into business with?
Well, the reason I'm asking is because if you did, you're soon going to find the Queensland government will be a lot more helpful in getting your project up and running.
Mhm.
Although some people might think it's going to be too helpful to the developers of these projects. So the Queensland government last week introduced to Parliament a proposed law that will completely overhaul the state's planning regime for what it calls state strategic projects. And these are projects that it considers will be particularly important to the state for one reason or another. And these projects tend to need a lot of help to get them up and running. And what this bill does is bring in a range of new powers for the government to help them. For example, these big projects often need a lot of supporting infrastructure, maybe new transport routes or new water and energy infrastructure or changes to port infrastructure. So the new bill will allow the state government's Coordinator General to lead the development of infrastructure coordination plans. Another thing the bill will do is allow the Coordinator General to compulsorily acquire land that a company or government agency needs to get a project up and running. So say that a company has been trying to buy a site but hasn't been able to convince the owner to sell, it can go to the government's Coordinator General and ask them to intervene and buy it. The Coordinator General will also have new powers to set conditions giving a proponent access to roads and railways.
And there is another new power that the proposed law introduces, which is probably the most controversial new power. The proposed law will enable the government to issue modification orders so that strategic resource and infrastructure projects can bypass some standard legislative requirements. According to Deputy Premier and State Development Minister Jared Leigh, the regime will allow project-specific targeted intervention without what he called time-consuming legislative amendments. Deputy Premier Leigh said that the changes in part reflect the state government's desire to benefit from a critical minerals framework signed by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and US President Donald Trump.
So I don't know what you think of this one, Francisca, but I'm all for large parts of it. With a big infrastructure project, it's good to be able to set conditions about the associated infrastructure at the same time, for example.
Mm.
I hate the idea of modification orders because honestly, you should be able to design legislation so that you can accommodate even very large projects within it. And I don't like this regime and I don't think it's necessary.
There are some things that, do make one uncomfortable, like the ability for the Coordinator General to intervene and buy a property when an owner hasn't been able to be convinced to sell it. I'll
Yeah.
have to read more on the conditions around that, but that does seem a little concerning to me.
And I think it's worth noting just how much change there has been to planning and environmental assessment legislation around Australia. So we've got a new act in the
Recently,
Northern Territory last year, a new act in Western Australia last year, legislative changes in South Australia. I can't remember if they were last year or the year before. There's this bill now in Queensland. There's legislation in New South Wales that which is currently before Parliament focused on renewable energy projects, which doesn't include modification orders.
Mm.
There's and of course there's the EPBC Act changes. So the task of getting big infrastructure projects off the ground, the task of complying with legislative requirements, it's very different now, or it's about to be very different pretty much everywhere in Australia.
Yeah, Murray, it is a big time of flux, some big changes. Staying on environmental law changes, you just mentioned the EPBC Act that was passed last year, but there's another law that passed back in 2023, and it will potentially also have a big impact on how we go about protecting nature. And that was the Nature Repair Market Act, which allows landholders to earn potentially valuable biodiversity certificates if they make improvements to native vegetation on their land by following specified improvement methods. The Australian government is still working out what those methods should be, and it's just released a new draft of what's called the Protect and Conserve method, which, as the name suggests, focuses on the long-term protection and conservation of biodiversity. Now, Murray, you might wonder who's going to buy these biodiversity certificates? And quite a
Yes.
few people are wondering just how much of a market this nature repair market will actually turn out to be. But there's one potential group of buyers for some of these certificates, and it's companies and government agencies that need environmental offsets. Now, we've talked about environmental offsets before. If a business or government agency is working on a project that could have some impact on important parts of our natural environment, like a threatened native plant or animal, their first obligation is to try to stop having an impact. But if they can't entirely prevent the impact or the harm, then they might be allowed to use environmental offsets to compensate for the residual harm their project will cause. And these environmental offsets should result in a net gain in terms of protecting the threatened species involved. How this connects to the nature repair market is that under some circumstances, people who register nature repair market projects and earn biodiversity certificates will be able to sell their certificates to companies or agencies that will use those to meet their environmental offset requirements. The extent to which the nature repair market is going to be capable of supporting the EPBC Act and the protection of our native plants and animals is still very much unknown. It might be very minor or it could be significant. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, there's a lot of skeptics about the nature repair market, but
Mm.
when you look at how much more money we need to put into nature restoration, it seems pretty crucial that we use whatever means we can to direct money towards it.
I agree completely. And there is a lot of hope and promise in this. Like we said, it could be very significant. And I think it depends on where it lands.
Yeah.
Mm.
If you're enjoying the Earth Pod, give it some stars or a thumbs up and tell your friends about it. And you can find out more about the things we talk about today in the Earthed newsletter, which you can read for free at earthed.au. That's earthed.au. You can help us to continue and grow by following the pod and signing up for the newsletter. You can sign up to the newsletter for free, or if you want to help us cover production costs and grow, you can sign up on a low-cost paid plan.
Back to the news. And on the clean energy front, the Federal Environment Department has released some initial EPBC environmental information prepared by Iberdrola for its proposed massive 3 gigawatt Aurora Green offshore wind project. The Aurora Green wind farm would be located at least 25 kilometres off Victoria's Gippsland coast. The EPBC information covers the geophysical and geotechnical site investigations that the company needs to undertake, and not the actual construction of the wind farm. Just a reminder, there is no evidence that offshore wind turbines cause whale deaths or whale strandings. The big risk to whales are encounters with ships and entanglement in fishing nets. And here's a bit of an audio clip. Here's a bit of audio from a YouTube clip featuring Renee, who is Iberdrola's Senior Manager of Stakeholder Engagement for Offshore Wind.
It's funny, I remember as a kid driving past the big coal-fired power stations with my dad, who was an electrician, and him looking up and saying, I strung those lights or I helped build that. And looking at that huge infrastructure, I never expected that one day I might be able to say to my kids, I helped develop that, and that has contributed to Australia's energy history. My name's Renee Koroski. I'm the Senior Stakeholder Manager for Iberdrola Australia, and I'm working on the Aurora Green offshore wind project here in Gippsland. So Iberdrola Australia has been around for quite a while, but while we've done offshore wind overseas, it's never been done here in Australia. And Gippsland has some of the best wind energy in the world. So to be able to develop something in the region that I live in is really exciting.
Efforts to protect and restore a huge freshwater wetland system have entered an important new chapter. The Great Cumbung wetland is located at the junction of the Murrumbidgee and Lachlan rivers in the Murray-Darling Basin in southwest New South Wales, and it's spread across 2 large agricultural properties. Back in 2019, the Nature Conservancy and Tiverton Agriculture acquired the 2 agricultural properties, and that move by them prevented the properties being converted from grazing to irrigated agriculture. That in turn protected the extensive reed beds and river red gums within the swamp, which is regarded as one of the most important waterbird breeding areas in Australia, and which also helps native animals survive times of drought. Now the 2 stations have been sold to the Narri Narri Tribal Council, who will take over conservation and management of the site. The purchase was made with the help of a Bank Australia impact loan that was supported by the Australian Government's Clean Energy Finance Corporation. The Narri Narri Tribal Council's wetland restoration works will focus on removing floodplain barriers so that the area can naturally flood once again, and regenerating native wetland and woodland systems, including river red gum, black box and mallee species, while also carrying out some grazing as well. And here's some audio from a video clip about the project.
You know your country's healthy when you can close your eyes and hear. You can hear everything. You can hear the birds, the frogs, the kangaroos, pads, the little tweaks in the trees. That's your country talking to you. Then you know you're doing something right.
CFC Finance is supporting the Narri Narri Tribal Council to acquire the Great Cumbung assets. And through Narri Narri Management, they're going to restore this ecosystem for climate change mitigation.
Wetlands have a 3 to 4 times potential to store carbon greater than trees.
You need these places because in a really pristine environment, like it literally provides for the rest of the world, not just Australia.
They're called the kidneys of nature because it filters water. It is the heartbeat of our ecosystems.
The Great Cumbung is a reedy wetland, and that means that as the reeds grow, then they're also able to sequester carbon or pull carbon out from the atmosphere, and then it's stored in the soil.
I'm Jamie Woods, Chair of No Tribal Council. I'm one of the blessed ones that get to live and breathe and manage countries such as the Great Cumbung. One of our main goals and vision for the Great Cumbung is to let the mighty Lachlan River run again. The last couple 100 years, obviously, it's hurt a little bit through heavy grazing and mostly by harvesting timber.
What a wonderful story. I love a good news story like that. Now we want to give a shout out to the federal bureaucrat who came up with the name of a government program that subsidises motor vehicle dealers and repairers to install fast electric vehicle charging at their premises. The program is called the Dealership and Repairer Initiative for Vehicle Electrification Nationally, or DRIVEN for short. Very clever.
Very clever. So brilliant.
I'm kind of like, I've never really heard repairer as a name of anybody. It works, so we're
Yeah.
going with it.
Yeah.
Anyway, motor vehicle dealers and repairers have until August 28 to apply for a grant to install fast EV charging at their businesses under the Driven program. In the current funding round of the 5-year program, grants totaling $20 million will be available. As the government points out, the business benefits of hosting public fast EV chargers include attracting more visitors, strengthening the role of the business within the community, and unlocking new revenue streams through leasing or partnerships with EV charging providers. And it's worth noting that the Driven program is separate to a national EV charging network program that is being implemented nationwide by NRMA and will deliver up to 77 EV chargers on key highway routes. And there's also other work being done by the Australian Renewable Energy Agency to support the rollout of electric vehicles.
One of the things that Parliament sometimes do, apart from passing legislation, is to endorse motions to show that the Parliament is backing a particular concept, a view, or finding. And the New South Wales Legislative Council has just agreed to a motion about air pollution and breathing and heart problems, which was moved by Greens politician Amanda Cohn. Dr. Cohn's motion noted the publication of a new peer-reviewed article based on an Australian study, which found a clear link between people being exposed to two air pollutants, nitrogen dioxide and small particles, and subsequently being hospitalised for breathing or heart problems. According to Dr. Cohn, conservative estimates suggest air pollution accounts for a total national burden of disease comparable to the burden of sun exposure. The motion supports the exploration of further measures to reduce air pollution in New South Wales.
I was actually, when I read that previous article, I was like, oh, I don't know anything about nitrogen dioxide. I, know a lot about N2O, but not nitrogen dioxide. So did a little reading about it. And yeah, it's a major issue. So I'm glad that it's at least been noted and something for further measures to address.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, our other podcast, Track Changes, we always ask people at the end, what's one fact that you wish people knew that would help us move faster to a cleaner, greener, better world? And when we did the chat with Tony Chappell, who's the chief executive of the New South Wales EPA, his fact was he wished people realised the huge, huge health costs associated with vehicle air pollution in particular. Yeah.
And vehicles and coal-fired power stations are two of the sources of nitrogen dioxide. Most of the time when we ask that question, though, Murray, I often hear positive things that are uplifting, not like, here's the truth or something,
That's right. The cold, hard truth. Oh, somebody's got to be glass half empty.
Someone's got it. We hear a lot about the need to recycle old solar panels and batteries, which is absolutely crucial. Well, last week, the Western Australian government announced it will provide $17.8 million in the state budget to boost the state's capacity to recycle solar panels and batteries. A total of $13 million will go towards establishing new collection, transport and processing pathways for end-of-life solar panels from both households and solar farms. An additional $3 million will support local governments to collect embedded batteries, such as those found in e-bikes and household devices.
Okay, well, how much water will new data centres in Victoria need? Well, Melbourne Water isn't sure. Melbourne Water has told the state's Essential Services Commission that there is, quote, considerable uncertainty about data centre water demand. According to Melbourne Water, there's a lot of uncertainty around when and where new data centres might want to connect to the water system, and also about whether they might use fresh water or possibly even recycled water.
Melbourne Water mightn't have a clear idea about data centre impacts, but the organisation that operates Australia's main electricity grid has been doing a lot of thinking about how much electricity they might need. And this story has the answer to our quiz question too. According to the Australian Energy Market Operator, at the end of March 2026, 11 large-scale data centre projects representing 5.4 gigawatts of maximum electricity demand were progressed through the transmission connection process. Around 60% of the proposed capacity is in New South Wales and 40% in Victoria, with most projects in early stages. Most of the projects are targeting connection within 2 years. The Australian Energy Market Operator says Australia is currently home to 162 data centres, operational nationally, predominantly in Sydney and Melbourne, accounting for around 2% of today's grid-supplied electricity use. In Western Australia, there are currently 15 sites in operation. It forecasts that data centre electricity consumption across Australia will increase from 2% to 6% of grid-supplied electricity by 2030, before continuing to climb to around 34 terawatt hours or 12% by 2050.
Finally, congratulations to Martine Wilder, who was made an Officer of the Order of Australia in the King's Birthday Honours list. Martine received the AO honour for distinguished service to environmental conservation, to the renewable energy sector, to sustainable finance, to animal welfare and to the law. And congratulations to Professor Terence Jayaretnam, who was made a member of the Order of Australia for significant service to social justice and to environmental conservation and sustainability.
That's it for today. You're all up to date. 2 more people are crucial to making this podcast happen: Sophie Sideris and the co-founder of the Earth News Service, Chris Danzy. To find out more about what we talked about today and other news of the week, check out the Earth newsletter at earthed.au. And if you support the Earth newsletter, you are also supporting this podcast. And if you're enjoying this pod, there's something we'd like you to do to help to spread the word about it. Please share it with a friend, a colleague, or your network. And give us some stars on your pod listening platform. When Spotify and Apple sees stars or YouTube sees a thumbs up, they're more likely to put our pod in front of other people.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.